Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ansible library. Thanks for stopping by again. This is part 3 in my 2025 books in review. If you haven't watched the first 2 episodes, I recommend checking them out, just sort of where I explain why I'm decided to do these videos and my criteria for the books I am reviewing. But just want to keep moving along. Got a lot of catching up to do before I reach books that I'm currently actively reading. So a lot of these are still going to be books that I read at the beginning of the year that I'm just trying to catch up on my reviews. So let's just hop right to it. The next book that I read this year was Spin by Robert Charles Wilson. This book won the Hugo Award in 2006, I believe. And it's a first part of a 3-book trilogy of the Spin trilogy, I think it's called. Axis being the sequel and Vortex being the third one. And I was pretty interested going into reading this one. I'd heard some stuff about the book, general ideas and stuff about the book prior to starting it, and I thought it sounded really interesting, so I wanted to give it a go. And so basically the Earth has been encapsulated in this membrane by this unknown alien race or entity that they call the hypotheticals. And what this membrane does is it slows down time on the planet in relative to the rest of the universe. So I think it was 1 year on Earth was 100 million years for the rest of the universe. And it's this big mystery about why this super advanced race did it, what the reasoning behind it was, why they chose Earth. I really liked how the characters in the book and Earth as Earth as a whole sort of uses the membrane to its benefit, since one of the biggest obstacles to space colonization or exploration or anything that is time and distance, that they use the membrane very effectively in that they send out all these rockets to sort of start terraforming Mars. And it's a process that would take millions of years, but because the time dilation is so vast that it's only after a couple months that they send these rockets out that Mars is able to hold life. It has an atmosphere and a sustainable environment. So they send colonies out to Mars to populate it, and it's just after a brief short time on Earth, it ends up those civilization on Mars has been around longer than the entire civilization of Earth, because it's been millions or thousands and thousands of years for them. But they end up getting encased in a membrane as well. And there's just it's a great mystery about what's going on and why it's happening. And I was very satisfied with the reason behind why the hypotheticals are doing this and why they picked Earth. And I was satisfied with the ending. It felt like a good, solid ending where it just set up sort of this world and a situation in a way that, yeah, if you wanted to read more, the next 2 books are there. Since reading this one, I have read the sequel, and I'll say I didn't enjoy it as much because it is a very different kind of story, where yes, the hypotheticals are still involved, and yes, it's this other mystery, but it felt smaller scale in a way, just because it isn't the time dilation factor of the first one is such a huge part of it that Robert Charles Wilson, he wrote very well and used very well in his storytelling. And so I really liked it. I really enjoyed reading it. I would recommend at least giving Spin a try. If it captures your attention enough, then yeah, give Axis a try. And I will read Vortex here, hopefully by the end of the year. And so I'll be able to review the series as a whole. But there was a lot of interesting concepts that he was able to play out really well. And moving along, the next that I read this year was The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. This, at the time, was the first Le Guin I read, and I figured if I'm diving into such a prominent science fiction writer, I might as well start with what's highly considered as one of the best science fiction stories ever written. And I really liked it. Yes, it's true. It is. I can understand why people have it at the top of their list for a lot of top 100, top 10 lists of best science fiction ever written. And she is a very beautiful writer. And it's, since reading it, yes, I have read some more of her stuff pretty recently, more of her earlier stuff, and I'm enjoying her as a writer. I like the vagueness of the universe she's creating in these books. It's part of the Hainish Cycle, I believe, is what sort of her overarching universe is called between a lot of her novels and novelettes and things. It's not a continuous story. It's not anything you have to read in a set order. It's just set loosely in this universe where mankind didn't first evolve on Earth. They evolved on this other planet millions of years ago, and they spread out through the galaxy and started populating all these other planets, which Earth is one of them. But for whatever reason, the galactic civilization collapsed, and all these different planets were sort of left isolated to evolve and grow on their own. In The Left Hand of Darkness, the main character, Genli, I believe his name is an envoy to this planet called Winter, because it is a very cold planet, mostly winter, all snowing, storms all year round. He's sent to this planet as an envoy of the Echo Men. And the Echo Men is a loose correlation of worlds, sort of trying to reestablish this galactic civilization and find all these isolated pockets of humanity on these planets, and see if they want to join in with this League of Planets. And so Genli, he's this ambassador to negotiate pretty much with the inhabitants of this planet. But the inhabitants of this planet are very unique in the sense that the world was initially populated, they believe, it was a genetic experiment for a different sort of race of humanity, where everyone on the planet was ambisexual. So they didn't have a set gender, where most of the time they are genderless. They don't have, male or female organs or anything like that. But once a month, they go into this state where it's random sort of what gender they will assume, and they become hyper fertile, hypersexual. It's a very gender neutral world and culture, and since everybody is capable of getting pregnant and giving birth and being a mother and raising children in that way, and everyone's capable of being men, and there's no patriarchal sort of society that has evolved everywhere else, and it's a very peaceful planet where there's no violent crimes, is sort of non-existent, and there's no war. It's this very well written and well thought out world of what this society would act like and be like, and people's roles in it, and how it would be different than ours in a way. And at first, I'll admit, I didn't know what I was getting into. It was a lot of information at first, just with the culture and the religions on the planet and the cycles the inhabitants go through and everything like that. But it started to flow. Once you got the sort of idea behind it, it flows nicely, and you start to feel for these characters. I can understand why a lot of people have it at their top, and as a lot of people have it at the top of their list, but I still thought it was good. I wouldn't put it in my top 10 just because it was more of a personal story than this grand science fiction epic, which I feel like in my readings I'm understanding that I enjoy more. But it very much had a lot of the same feel as reading A Time of Changes, which I reviewed in my first video, where it was a very personal story just about being on this world with a very unique set of rules or laws or evolutionary ticks or anything like that. So it still was very good, and I'm enjoying reading more of her stuff, and yeah, I'll keep on doing it. And next up that I read this year was Hothouse by Brian Aldiss. And I got interested and decided I want to read this from watching some other booktube videos and people talking about it, and it made me very interested in it. And I hadn't heard of Brian Aldiss before or read any of his other stuff, and so I was always on the lookout for it at sort of the used bookstores and the places I go to check out for books, but I never find it. So it's actually one of the few books that I specifically ordered online because I wanted to give it a go and couldn't wait any longer to just find it naturally. It's this awesome story where it's the far, far, far future of the Earth, and the Earth has been tidally locked with the sun. So one side of it's always facing the sun, one side of it's always facing away. And because of this, its plant life and vegetation has exploded sort of on the sun's side in this sort of hothouse jungle environment, and plants have become the main organic life form on the planet, and they've become omnivore, and they're very much a predatory animal now. And the moon has been captured in a web by these giant plant-like spiders that traverse space, and so it's forever connected to the Earth and locked onto it. And just for sheer world building and sheer imagination on what this kind of planet would be like, humans have evolved, or de-evolved, I should say, to these short little green-skinned native people that live in the treetops and just in these tribal groups, and it just follows this one tribe in this horrible existence of living on this planet where it seems everything and anything is out to kill you and devour you, and just how they survive on this planet. And it was just this fun read, and I couldn't wait to see what he would do next with what he created. He got a lot of criticism from other science fiction writers and stuff at the time because it does ignore a lot of basic science and basic physics and understanding of sort of what would happen on a planet tidally locked and things like that. But that's not important. For just the sheer joy of it and the sheer imagination of it, it was an awesome read. And yeah, I am so glad I picked it up and read it. And just moving along, next I read this year was The Adventures of the Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. And this was a collection of the first 3 published Stainless Steel Rat books. The Stainless Steel Rat, The Stainless Steel Rat's Revenge, and The Stainless Steel Rat Saves the Planet. It was the first 3 published. It's, I think, volume numbers 4, 5, and 6 in the timeline of the series as a whole. He's written many of these Stainless Steel Rat books, but this was just the first 3 collected into one volume, and it was a fine read. It very much feels for the time period of what it was written in. I think the late 50s, early 60s, something like that was the first one, and follows this character, goes by the name of Slippery Jim, and he's this con artist, thief, criminal man, and very much feels like James Bond type, where he's not a spy, but he's got all these gadgets. It kind of got repetitive and boring in the sense that every time he find himself in this tricky situation, ends up, oh, he has a plan for this, and he has a contingency for that, and he has the right gadget for this, and he's always able to slip away. It never felt like he was in danger because it always ended up being that he had planned for this inevitable situation that arises. And when things do happen that he didn't plan for, he's still able to pretty easily and readily, it seems like, turn it to the best of his advantage and make it make it beneficial to him. He gets captured by this secret organization that's sort of founded and run by former criminals, because the best way to catch a criminal is to use a criminal. So they recruit him to join their cause, or else, go to jail and get brainwashed and not become who he is anymore. And so he accepts, but he accepts with the knowledge that he's going to betray them at the first time he can. He goes on this mission to find the secret warship that's being constructed, and the criminal he's chasing is this woman, Angelina, who he's coming to respect as a criminal, except for the fact that she doesn't have the same moral code as him, and it will kill at the slightest whim, and is leaving behind bodies, and whole crews of ships are being killed, and by this woman. He feels like he's got to bring her down because she's given a bad name to criminals, and so it sort of becomes this personal hunt for her. And it was a fun read, and it had its moments of the ways he gets out of situations and the technology he uses, and sort of he's a master of disguise, and how he slips through the nets and things like that was fun to read. But it was just became this weird story of how we find out, like, the main Angelina, the reason she does what she does is because she was born ugly, and the only way to not be ugly for her anymore, she decided to go to crime, to steal and kill and raise money so she could have these operations to make her beautiful. And her beauty is this huge reason why Slippery Jim is infatuated with her, because she's one of the most beautiful women he's ever seen. And if only she didn't kill people, that he could find himself loving her. But she sort of becomes obsessed with it and just kills without mercy and on whim. And it's this weird dynamic where he is so in love and infatuated with her, but can't stand for what she does. So when he doesn't end up catching her, it's just this weird ending where she gets caught, and they treat her mental state, and she gets brainwashed. So she still has all those same attributes of drive and ambition and criminal talents, but her urge to kill is no more. And so now she's able to be loved by Slippery Jim, and they end up getting married at the end. And it was just, I did not like that. It was this weird, she's a brainwashed, instead of killing her, life in jail, this is how they deal with criminals, is they just alter their mind to be, societally correct. And because of this, he marries her, and she's a big part of the next two books, at least, probably the rest of the series, as far as I know. It was a fun, quick read. Each of the little stories, you could pick up any of them at any point and read it and get something out of it, but it just felt a little shallow at times, a little thin at times. So I thought it was good to read, to sort of experience that type of story. And I see the stainless steel rat stuff all over the place, so I was happy to get this sort of trilogy of books and get a taste for it. But I don't think it was for me, and I don't think I'll continue on any of it. Next up that I read this year was Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. And it was the first of a trilogy. This was a book that, going into, from reading the back of the book, I didn't think I would enjoy it. I didn't think I'd understand it. But I kept seeing everywhere, kept hearing about it, so figured I'd give it a go. And it's another one of those amazing world-building stories where he is able to create this environment so completely and so fleshed out and lived in. It feels real, that it was just such a enjoyable thing to read. I do feel like he was trying to cram too much of world building into it at once in this first story. It felt that every 100 pages or so, there was some new element that was introduced, that to just be layered on top of the other, and not just elements that were for flair or for, fleshing out a scene or something, that become intricate, important elements of the story, and so it just felt like he could have got the same result with less. Not saying it ruined the experience for me, because it was all enjoyable, but even 400 pages in, he was introducing this new aspect to the story that just felt like it wasn't needed. Like, yes, it all played out at the end, and yes, everything is connected and felt like it was important, but I feel like he could have got away with some things. It's about this scientist who he is hired by this race of bird like people, but he's hired by this one individual from this race who has been banished and his wings have been cut off. And he hires this scientist, to the main character, to make him be able to fly again. He doesn't want a contraption. He doesn't want a machine. And everything is sort of in this Victorian steampunk sort of technological level of steampunk with some kind of magical elements in there. And so he doesn't want to have a machine to fly for him. He wants to be able to fly. Then it just turned into this other thing and kept adding these elements to it. And I was captured enough at the beginning thinking it would be this one thing, but it turns into this crazy story about, in his research for studying how he flies, he's collecting all these different flying animals and bugs to study them, see if he can learn anything. And he gets hold of this caterpillar, unknown giant caterpillar, that eventually turns into this huge monstrous moth that can hypnotize people. And it sucks their not physically sucking their brain out of their head, but just like their dreams and their thoughts and their mentality is sucked into those, and that's how they feed. And it becomes this story revolving around hunting these unkillable monsters that are hunting the city, and all these different aspects are added on to hunt these moths. Like, demons are involved, and giant cactus people are involved, and eventually, like, artificial intelligence is sort of introduced, and this race of city spanning network of robots that all run on steam power and are programmed by punch card and things, but have gained sentience, they get involved. And even my favorite aspect of it was this giant interdimensional spider from these race called the Weavers gets involved. And these giant spiders are so focused on creating what they perceive as the world and the web of reality to make it more beautiful, that they are just so unpredictable in what they will do, in what they think they need to do to make the web beautiful, that every interaction with it is just this unknowable horror of what it's capable of and what it will do left. But they get involved, and it's this huge undertaking, it feels. And it was all a lot of fun and a lot to digest and wrap your head around, but it was all so well written and so interesting that I couldn't put it down, really. I flew through reading it, and it even though it was such a lot to take in, not a moment of it was dull. The next I read was Eon by Greg Bear, and I have the hardcover 2-volume set of the first two, Eon and Eternity, of the Way series. I think there's a third one that's actually a prequel. Even though I have the 2-volume set, I just read the first one. And yeah, I'll get around to reading the second one. It was enjoyable enough and left some questions open to me that I want to read it just to see if any of those questions get answered. But it's pretty much a big dumb object book, is what they call them, where it's on Earth in the 2000s. This asteroid enters the solar system, and it's showing the characteristics of being not a natural thing. And so it's about the nations of Earth rushing to study this asteroid, which they discover is split up into these chambers with artificial gravity and artificial light and cities. And there's 7 chambers, and it's this mystery where it's coming from. It all seems uninhabited at the time, and it's discovered that this asteroid is from an alternate Earth's future timeline. And studying this asteroid in the libraries on it, they discover that it's from this alternate history, but it talks about this great death, this atomic war that wipes out the Earth, and they're afraid that the same great death is going to happen. And it ends up, because of this asteroid coming in this timeline, that's what sets off this war between nations on Earth. And so the Russians sends forces to capture this asteroid structure and fighting off the UN forces on board. The people on the asteroid are sort of isolated and separated from the world, and so they have to sort of come to terms and come together. But the real mystery of it is the seventh chamber of this asteroid appears to go on to infinity. It appears to just continue on extending and never have an end. And how is this possible? And how is this total disregard for space and time possible, and what it means? And so the first half of the book I really liked. First half with the coming of the stone and the mystery behind it and the studying behind it and following the characters trying to figure this out and trying to postpone or stop or put an end to this great death before it happens. And even when they're unsuccessful and they're isolated, it still kept me wanting to read more. It felt really well written and really interesting. But then the second half of the book gets super weird, and it's involving, they find out, this seventh chamber is inhabited by this race of humans from this alternate timeline. And it's, I think, like 1,000 years in their future since they abandoned the rest of the stone, this asteroid, to live on, they call it the Way. That's this infinitely expanding thing. And it just goes into this weird territory. There were some cool concepts and ideas of how this Way is sort of gateways. They can open gateways to any point in space, any time in space. And so alien races and advanced civilizations are now using this Way as a means to quickly traverse the universe, because it's shortens the distance between these areas drastically. And it's sort of this human nation that's controlling it, and is sort of this founding father for this intergalactic civilization that's forming because of the Way. And so there was a lot of cool concepts and ideas in that, but it just got it just seemed to take a 180 on this interesting, hard science fiction, like felt realistically possible story in the first half, to this super far advanced technologies. And they still go into the hard science fiction of the math and the science behind what would be needed to open these gateways, and it makes sense for them, but I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And just following one of the main characters' progression through it, and her studying of it, and just what happens to her, and it becomes this weird political story between these two factions of the people living on the Way. And it left enough open to me at the end, and left enough questions unanswered that I wanted answered, that I might give the second one a try. Who knows? I have it in this volume. I might as well finish it off and see how I feel about it. But it was just this hard switch in my feeling between the first and second half. And so you might enjoy it. You might enjoy sort of the high technology, science, math, and stuff behind it in the second half. But I couldn't wrap my head around it. So, but that'll be it for this batch of books. Thanks for stopping by. Once again, I'd like to hear some comments on sort of things I can improve on, sort of things I could change, and leave some suggestions for what I should read next. Once I catch up in the year, I'm going to do some more specialized videos and try to get more involvement. But I just feel like I wanted to slog these ones out and and catch up to where I'm currently reading and be more coherent and more focused and more fresh in my mind on certain things. But yeah, I hope to see you next time. Thanks.